Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery. I'm back. I've taken a month or maybe even a little bit more than a month off of YouTube and took a break from making videos and really just took a break from everything. Wasn't necessarily planned, it actually was a necessity. My mom fell, hurt herself, was in the hospital, rehabilitation facility, finally got to leave, come home, and then my work really started then because I've been helping take care of her, helping her in day-to-day life, and it's just now calming down enough and really getting a routine, and of course her getting better every day is helping too. So I'm getting a little bit of time to get back into things, get caught back up on all that I've been missing, and emails, being able to come back and and work with people. So this video is actually going to be a request that was given to me by another archer. This was off of Archery Talk by a member on there. His name is Alan. So Alan, I really appreciate this. I'm pretty sure you'll see this. Thank you for the recommendation. I hope this video is going to live up to what you were wanting, and I'm also hoping it'll help a lot of different archers. So what I'm going to be going over is 10 common release execution errors and problems that I see, and then I'm going to go over brief explanations on how to correct them, and at the end of this video give you a glimpse into a fully functional video that I'm going to be coming out with soon to help you build the perfect release execution. Hey everybody, before we get too deep into this video, I actually want to go over one thing really quickly. I want to talk about Twisted X bowstrings. They are actually sponsoring this video. They're helping me be able to make these and reach out to as many archers as I can to be able to get my information to you and to help you with your archery endeavors. Twisted X Bowstrings is a company that I've used for the last couple years now on all my personal bows, and also on some bows for friends and customers of mine that I've helped set up and tune. These are all made by one individual. His name is Shane. He's the one that owns the company, and they've all been extremely perfect and very well made, every set that I've ever got, whether they're mine or even if they were someone else's that were brought to me that Shane had no idea that I would ever even see. So it's not just specially made for me. He goes through a lot of pain and effort on my strings, and he'll do the same for you. He's made me custom sets for specific lengths when I have long string bows. He puts in a specific diameter here for my center serving. He goes through and makes my yokes a certain length. He uses special serving material per my request on my yokes because of circumstances on the way that I set up my bows and what I'm looking for, and they hold up extremely well. My first set that I ever had of his, I did not wax, I did not take care of, I did not do anything with except for abuse and shoot them and twist them and half twist them for 8 months that they were on the bow. And I mean, they were fine. When I finally got, I ended up selling the bow and getting a new one, but when I was finally through with it, they were still in amazing quality. There wasn't any threads that were starting to fray, anything coming off on them. I did a quick wax job on everything around the cable guard, all that, and they were perfect. So if you're looking for somebody to reach out to on your string set, check out Twisted X Bowstrings. I'll put a link down in the description below for his website, and that way you can go to it. He's got an excellent string builder where you can pick and choose colors and how they're going to look for servings, different colors on threads, everything. Currently he is using BCY X material and BCY Mercury, their new material that they've just come out with. Alright, so common error that I see, number one and number two, I'm going to combine these together, is going to be jerking on the release or punching at the release. Now the reason I'm going to combine these two together and talk about them is they're somewhat related depending on what type of release you're using, and whether it be a trigger or a hinge or maybe even a resistance type release. But I see this pretty commonly by archers, and a lot of them, when I talk to them about it, especially the archers that I work with and coach, they all say pretty much the same thing. They're watching the pin get to the target and they're not relaxing, they're not calm in their shot, they're not calm in their aim, they're not focusing correctly. And what they'll do is they see the pin there and they think, well, I need to pull through my shot, that's the correct way to do it, but my pin's there, so I need to hurry and do this really quick, and you'll see them just pop their hand back. And their hand just is wild and it goes everywhere, and hey, they missed. Their pin might have been on target, or it might not have been, who knows by that point, but everything you do on your release execution is on the back end of that arrow, and it has a very big control over it. If you pop your hand out away from your face, you're pulling the back of the arrow off to the side, and it's going to shoot it to the left if you're a right-handed archer, or to the right if you're a left-handed archer, and you're going to miss. Same thing as if you're jerking and pulling the hand straight up, pulling it straight down, whatever it may be. The opportunity for you to just jerk and pull straight back in a smooth manner doing it that way is very, very low. So you're going to see some misses. The same thing with punching. And of course, punching, everybody's heard about and everybody knows that one, but whether it be a thumb button and you're just mashing on that, thumb trigger, or an index release and you're just popping it and snapping the release off, that's two things that I commonly see an error with. Now, the correction for that is really just looking at what we're doing with our aiming and becoming comfortable with what we're doing. Now, I've talked about this in several videos, and I'll put a link here. That way you can see it up at this video as well. You can kind of reference back to it, but it's building your shot timing and becoming comfortable with your float. And that revolves a lot around your form and a lot around how you're setting your shot up, obviously. But in a whole, you're really getting comfortable with seeing your pin floating around the middle of the target, whether it's there all the time or not, and developing everything within a shot timing window. And that's what I went over in that video, and that's what I really think helps the most in that aspect, is to slow down on your shot and get comfortable with aiming on a target. Alright, so common problem that I see, number 3, is the exaggerated, predetermined, pre-planned follow-through. This one is big with archers that feel like they want to imitate another archer and their follow-through, or they feel like, maybe they, if they extend and do this follow-through a certain way, that it's doing it correctly. Maybe they've seen it on, a YouTube video of another archer shooting, whatever it may be, but it's pre-planned, and that's what I want to get away from. Pre-planning your, follow-through is not allowing your body to naturally move, and it's taking a huge step out of being able to become a better archer. Looking at your follow-through when it's happening, when it's over, assessing what happened, and really going through that to find out what problems you self-induced yourself, that's a huge part of becoming a better archer. If I'm following through in my natural motion, when that release break, my hand pops straight up like this, I know that I'm having to pull up on that release, and I need to find out why I'm doing that. Is there a bend in my wrist and I'm just naturally following my face and pulling up? Is my pin wanting to hover and come up on the target, and I'm pulling down with my release hand to compensate to bring that pin down? The same thing in reverse if you're pulling straight down, or a lot of times what I see archers do is the shot will break and their hand will just stay here. It doesn't move at all. And that means you're not engaging the back. You're not holding with those back muscles. Now, it doesn't need to be a continual motion back, but you do need to utilize the larger muscles in your body, because those tire down less quickly, and because it's a core muscle in your body being in your back, it's also going to help you hold steadier. So that's a big thing. Do not have a pre-planned, release execution follow through. You want to study that release hand. When your shot breaks and your hand comes back, you want to study that, and you want to see what it's doing so that you know what you need to correct. Error that I see, number 4, holding the release incorrectly. Now, this can also be for an index release. I see this honestly just as much on an index as I do with a handheld. On an index release, a lot of the times that strap is coming up the side of their hand. They're not securing it down here at your wrist. You want that strap to stay at the base of your hand and not slide up. It's going to put everything in an optimal position for you to wrap that finger around the trigger. It's also going to allow you to be able to pull through your shot and work your release correctly. Now, when it comes to a handheld, a lot of people hold these in so many different ways, and some of the times it really blows my mind. I've seen people hold them at the base of their palm here, right at their back, knuckles, and just really hold and just death grip that release. And when you do that, you're losing any movement you have in your fingers at all. This release is not going to rotate, and it's not going to move very freely in your hand. You're going to fight through that shot each and every time, and you don't want to monkey fist a handheld release. It's just not going to work for you. Now, the opposite of that, as I see people say, well, I need to have a relaxed hand, and they will hold these releases so far out on the end of their finger with their hands so open that you hear these horror stories of, I let go of my release, it slammed my riser, it shot it down range, it destroyed this, and you want to avoid that too. Now, Everything in archery is based on repeatability. You need to find a way to repeat what you're doing every single time. For me, I hold my release in a position in my hand that's going to allow the movement of my hand to work for me to help rotate a hinge or rotate a thumb button to pull that button into my thumb, and also to where I have optimal leverage on it and repeatability. So for me, that means holding it within this pad here in the second portion of my fingers. So I place it right here, and then you can wrap that release right around your hand here to where you can make what I would call a J hook out of your fingers. So it looks like a J whenever you're looking at it, wraps around. This allows you to not have to worry about the release flying out of your hand because it's too far out on the fingertips, and it also is going to give you access to movement in the hand where you're not, monkey fisting the release. Also, what I like to do is I place the release base here at the base of my fingertips, or at the base of this crease here in the middle of my fingers rather. So I do this every single time. I put it in the same spot. I can feel that when I pull this release out of my bag, and I know it's going to be there for me to work through my release. That is very important on a hinge release, especially because where you hold this release in your hand changes the speed of it based off of the amount of rotation that you're going to get out of those fingers. It's also going to change the way you set it up with your click. And with that said, that brings us to number 5, incorrect release setup. So incorrect release setup is not just for a hinge. It's going to be for an index release, it's going to be for a thumb release as well. When you set a release up, if it's going to be a trigger release, whether it be an index trigger or a thumb trigger, you need enough tension built into that trigger to where you can set the thumb on it, preload that tension into the actual trigger itself. So feel your skin on your thumb depress around that trigger as you press into it. So you're looking at this, you're actually wanting to almost move the release a little bit, have that much pressure to be able to put into it. Same thing with an index finger. You want to be able to wrap that index finger around that trigger and preload that trigger with tension. And when you have a hinge release, you need it set slow enough so you can engage these outside fingers. See a big mistake with a lot of archers, they barely do anything with these fingers, or they're outstretched and they're really cramming it down with their index finger. You want all of these fingers engaged. The reason you do this is because where you start your tension is where you're gonna have that tension remain and go throughout your shot. So if I have no tension on the outside of my release, whether it be a thumb release or a hinge release here, I can't add that tension in without additional movements, too much movement in my hand, changing my anchor point, or something haywire going with what my release is doing. If it's already there, it makes it much easier to expand through the shot, whether you do a curling of the fingers, whether you do a relaxation method, whatever it may be. And the same thing goes for a thumb trigger or an index finger. If you preload that tension onto that trigger base and then start your release execution, all that tension that's already there is gonna increase along with your release execution. So I've kind of broke one of my rules. Don't aim the bow at the camera, because I've killed a camera before on accident doing something similar to that. But I wanted to be able to show you the number 6 common problem that I see more firsthand there, and that's not studying your float before release execution and during release execution. So that's a big thing that I see with a lot of archers. A lot of archers, especially ones that I've worked with, maybe ones that have watched my video, they'll study their float and they know what it looks like before they go to shoot their bow. That's part of what I teach, it's part of what I look at whenever I go through my coaching. But a lot of people completely relax on that and forget all about it when their release execution starts. And that's a big no-no, because what you're doing back here can directly affect that float pattern. And if you notice it changing, maybe the size of the float, maybe it's opening up and getting bigger, or if you notice it drifting one way or the other, something like that going on, that's telling you that you're doing something incorrect with your release execution. Now for me, I teach, I use, and I build in a continual decrease in my float pattern and size of what I'm looking at on target with my release execution. So I've heard a lot of archers, I've heard an archer that teaches release usage and execution, they all struggle with their float opening back up when they use their release. I have found a way to actually make it go the opposite direction and your float shrink as you go through your release execution. That's a huge thing of what I do and what I build in with my teaching. Now that's something that I'm going to go over in the continuation of this video. I have an instructional video that I'm building and coming out with here in the next week that's going to be all about building your release execution, what you need to be doing, how to do it, and how to perfect everything you're doing to shrink that float while you do your release execution. But for sure, check what you're doing and look for cues that may be telling you something you're doing with this hand is incorrect. Alright, I'm going to do a scenario on my bow completely offset to what's actually happening here, but I just want to show you kind of what it looks like to maybe give an aha moment that says, hey, I'm doing that, or I've seen people do that. And that's going to be accordance to my 7th and 8th common error that I see, and that's not setting your peep height correctly and not setting your loop height correctly based off the release you're doing. I see this very commonly when people switch from an index release to a handheld, and also somewhat commonly whenever people are switching in between handheld releases. So this is what people will do. They'll draw their bow back, they'll come to anchor, and oh, my peep's not lined up, I need to move my hand, or I drop my hand here, or I'm pulling my head around, or I'm looking, or I'm doing something trying to line that peep up with the scope. It's incredibly important to line your peep up with your scope. I can shoot multiple different handheld and index releases, and as long as I'm lining my peep with my scope, doesn't matter where my hand is on my face. In fact, a month or so ago when I was at my local bow range, I was actually handed a hunting bow that I wanted to shoot a Carbon Defiant and just wanted to play with it. It was one of the shop owner's personal bows, and he let me play with it for a while, but his peep height was way off from what I needed, and I was using just a random index release out of a bucket that they give people to be able to test bows with. So my anchor was floating, my hand was not even on my face anywhere, and I was having to really adjust, but I could still shoot and keep my groups within the wide on a 5-spot target because I was lining that peep up with the scope. Now, the downside of what I'm doing with that is adapting to a bow versus adapting the bow to you. Now, it's very important that you adjust this peep height correctly to where it's going to fit your face, to where you can come to your natural anchor point and hold that, because that natural anchor point, the location where you're going to put your hand on your face there, that's going to be where you go every single time. It's going to be with your head in a vertical position, not leaning down, not leaning back. You're not having to tilt it or cock it around really funny. And it's going to be with a light facial pressure of the string. That's your perfect anchor point there. And then you just adjust that peep to match. Now, if you're using different types of games and a movable scope, there's other things that go into that. And I've talked about that in some of my other videos. And I've got an instructional video where I go over setting a peep for the actual sport that you're doing. But that's the general idea of what you're doing. Make sure you're setting that peep height correctly per release that you're using. Same thing can go with a loop. I'm a big believer that loop height is really affecting the leverage point on your bow and what you're seeing with your float and your aim on target. But I know some people that have gone from a handheld to an index or an index to a handheld, and they're so off on what they're needing to do, they do need to adjust that loop height. So that's something to look at as well. Common problem that I see, number 7 and number 8. Alright guys, we're closing into the end here. Common problem that I see, number 9, not committing to a release. This is very common when an archer goes from an index to a handheld, or maybe from a thumb trigger to a hinge, or even to a resistance type release. They get the release, they think it's going to be the greatest fix they've ever had and instant success, and it's not. So they quit, they go back to what they were using. You're not going to learn a release overnight, especially a hinge release, but every release is going to react differently in your hand, It's going to feel different in your hand. It's going to be a little bit different feeling for your anchor point and the way that you're going to shoot it and use it. This TrueBall HBC, I shoot and hold in my hand completely different from my TrueBall HT that I've made into a 2-finger. Same thing goes if it's a thumb release or resistance release. All those are different. The way you're using them is also different. So let's look at why you decided to change, and let's make the correct decision on what direction to go for which one you stay with. If you're fighting target panic, you need a resistance release. I would skip a hinge even, and I would just go straight to resistance. Stand Element, Carter Evolution, Carter Silverback, the knock-on version that they've done, one of those releases is what I would go to, because it's going to take a lot of the learning of a hinge and what you need to do with your hand completely out of the equation. Just pull. Because what you're doing at that point is you're focusing on an aim. Same thing if you're using a hinge. I love a hinge. It's my personal release choice. I can be smoother with one of these than I can with any other release. And it's because I've taken the time to learn how to shoot them, and I've committed to sticking with one release. And that really goes back to some of the stuff that we've talked about before. Peep height, loop height, adjustment on the speed, the tension of the trigger, all of that. You have to commit to that release in order to perfect that release. Alright, so common release execution error that I see, number 10, the very last one, not using a string trainer to learn your release. Now before I get really in depth into this and really talk about what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a brief second here. I am making a new instructional video, again, like I said, about all of this. It's going to go way more in depth than just the 10 issues that I saw here. I'm actually going to teach you how to build a release execution format to where you can master any release, slow your float down, and shrink the float that you're seeing on your target. So I'm going to go over every step that you can possibly think of throughout that, and I'm going to show you how to perfect everything that you're doing. Now where this starts here is this is really the number one thing you want to do. When you get a new release, whether it be a hinge, thumb button, index, whatever it may be, you want to take the time to take a string trainer. This is actually what is called a more-in trainer. This is an elastic band that's preset at certain poundages. It kind of mimic a holding weight, but honestly you can take a piece of string and tie it to your draw length plus loop length and make that what you use. I used that for a very long time until I got one of these, and this is really just an additional tool that I keep, and it's just something a little bit easier on my hand than a piece of string, and just kind of something that I want to do. There's other tools, there's other things out there. This was on Lancaster, and there's several more. The big thing is what I like to teach people to do is hold their string trainer in front of their face here. Don't go to full draw, go to here and see what you're doing with the release and what it's doing in conjunction with that. You can see how on a hinge especially, how deep you're holding it in your hand, the curl on your fingers, the angle, everything that it takes to get to the click, how you're going to execute that shot. You can see what you're doing with it to make it fire. Same thing with a button. It's a very good tool to set the tension on the button, so you can hold the release in your in front of your face here, pre-press your thumb on that button and actually see how much you're pressing on it. It may feel like you're pressing a lot when you're at full draw, but you're not. So this is a good tool to be able to use for that, and then taking it that one step further. So once you get everything in front of your face and you're using the release and you're playing with it and you're getting accustomed to it and really familiar with it, then you can take that one step further and come into full draw and really see what everything works out on there and work through your shot execution, your timing, anything that you're doing. All that's going to be good to use one of these tools. There's a lot more that goes into all this, a lot more problems that I see. 10 is obviously a very short but long list. I'd like to have gotten this down to 5, but I mean honestly 10 is even cutting it short on what you're doing. The big thing is your release execution, I guarantee you, is more important than your form. It's more important than your tuning, and people don't realize that. I have not shot a bow in over a month. I shot my bow 2 nights ago, 35 arrows, didn't have time to shoot a whole lot. I mentally have been working through my shot, my routine. I played with my string trainer a few times when I'd have an opportunity right before I went to bed, but I could pick my bow up, and because my release execution was solid and pre-programmed into my brain on what to do, I was still doing similar groups of what I was doing a month ago. Sure, the bow felt weird. It felt strange. My muscles weren't used to it. My muscles weren't built up and in shape to shoot the bow and hold as steady on target. But I trusted in my release execution to make up for a little shakier hold. And I could still group extremely well. Way more than what I thought I was going to do. I actually even surprised myself with that. And on top of that, that's coming from a small, lower small back injury that I've got. And, you know, all that's coming together. But the release execution, again, incredibly important. More so than your form. More so than your bow tuning. Everybody, you know, hates when I say that, but it's true. Thank y'all for watching the video today. Again, check out the video sponsors. I've got channel sponsors. I'm going to put their links down in the information below. Support the companies that support me. They're helping me make these videos. Without them, I can't make these videos. I just can't. And if you would like to become a channel or video sponsor for your business, your company, maybe there's a charity event coming on, something going on with your club, and you just want to get that information out, check my homepage on this YouTube channel. There's a video that I've got made that explains a little bit more about what I've done with my views, what I've done with my footprint on this channel, and what I can do to help you. Thank y'all for watching today. I'll see you soon.